Today's topic, change management. As a reminder to everybody here, membership masterminds is like this. What the heck is it? It's kind of this just group on LinkedIn that we started. The we being the Prop Fuel group team here. It is not designed to promote Prop Fuel, although it probably does a little because we're all running it, and a lot of you guys are our clients too. But we've got 860 people in LinkedIn that have said they want to be a part of this. It's mostly just these monthly discussions, although there is the community membership masterminds on LinkedIn. It's not highly active. Today's topic came out of our last session when Lynn chimed in with something about change management. Maybe I said something about change management, and I was just so fascinated. And I love this topic of change management because I think it is the biggest thing that gets in our way. I asked Lynn to join us here because she was, if you go down a few jobs, she was the executive director of the Association of Change Management Professionals. Now she's the director of community. You said community relations, but I beg to differ, Lynn. It looks like you're director of community engagement here with the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. And she got a consulting firm on the side, Leader to Leader Solutions. She's a CAE. And so, Lynn, thank you so much for helping facilitate today's conversation.
Absolutely. I love talking about change management because it literally changed my life.
How
Mm.
so?
Well, always, I was working for the Project Management Institute and I loved it because I like structure. I like
Yeah,
the way we can actually, you're given a task, you're giving a program, you're giving a project, and it's a way to actually get it done so that, at the end of the day, you've you've completed the task, you've completed the project, and you get a gold star. So I really liked that structure about here's how project management can work, and if you're building a bridge, the bridge is going to be right. I really appreciated that. But at the same time, I've always been in the association world. I mean, my title at the Project Management Institute, which was Manager of Worldwide Component Affairs, which, by the way, is a great way to introduce yourself when you're sitting next to a seatmate on a plane, because they will ask, well, what the heck is that?
yeah. What's a component?
Yeah, a component.
Associations are the only one that call chapters components.
Components. And I would just pop off, well, if anybody in the world is having an affair, I'm managing it.
No,
And it
no,
started great conversations.
no. Don't say that.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, as a result of the Project Management Institute, my work there, a group of people, some really smart project managers, were delving into the people side of project management because, projects are very structured, very, point A, point B, time boxes, everything that moves into that. But if you were to, and I love this example that was given to me by one of the sponsors for the association, was think about this. You're going to install a new technology platform into your association and you manage the project from point A to point B. You get that system installed, it's all working, etc. Think about it like this, a new accounting system.
Yeah,
So they install this new accounting system, and by all measures, they have a successful project,
perfect.
except for the fact that
Nobody uses it.
the coordinator in the accounting department says, this doesn't work for me. I don't like this. I can't use this. And so they go right back to using the Excel spreadsheet, which then cascades into other people not utilizing that system. And therefore, what looked like a successful project really didn't deliver its intended outcomes. So that whole people side of change, or the people side of project management, is where change management that kind of started to work. And Jeff Hyatt, who is one of the foremost thought leaders in change management, came up with, and I never could remember this one. It's the ADKAR methodology: awareness, desire, knowledge, acceptance, reward. Um,
Nice. Good work.
my brain's working this morning. Anyway, and it was built off of Cotter's 8 steps for change too. Two very good resources, by the way, if anybody wants, I'll drop them into the chat for you. If you want to dig into change management philosophies. But that's how it started. And, it's really helped me in not only my consulting business, but also because I work with people in associations. Think about it. We're constantly trying to evolve and build new programs, products, and services to meet our members' expectations. Well, how do we know that those expectations are met and that they're delivering their intended outcomes if we aren't kind of building that runway for it through change management to happen? There, long-winded answer.
Well, Lynn, this is exactly why I asked you to help facilitate today's discussion. Um, in fact, I'm writing myself a note. I want to get you on the Association Strong podcast too to talk about change management. That's the podcast I do with Tom Morrison.
Yeah, I should probably. Oh, I haven't seen Tom forever. Oh, no, just a minute. I do need to be very clear. I am not a CCMP. I help build the program, but I'm not a change
Yeah.
management professional. I'm a CA.
Okay. Okay. So nobody go to court with Lynn's advice.
Right.
The reason this topic is so interesting to me, as you all know, I'm a vendor in our space. I've been a software guy. I don't write code, but I've been a software efficiency guy for my entire career. I'm 54. In the 90s, I worked for a systems integration consulting firm. I was with PricewaterhouseCoopers for a little while, doing similar stuff, implementing Siebel and SAP systems. And my job, Lynn, was to go in and interview people in the roles in companies like Purdue, Compaq, and I would interview the sales department and ask them questions about how they did things so we could implement the sales and distribution software for SAP or for Siebel. And I remember in those days hearing the statistic that like I'm not going to try to guess the numbers, some outrageously high percentage of implementations failed. And we're talking about 80, $100 million implementations when you're dealing with like Coca-Cola and these big enterprise like Compaq or even Purdue Farms, like these guys implementing Siebel or SAP 100, $200 million implementations that fail because when they were looking at the budget, they're like, how much again? And they're like, what can we cut? And the first thing they cut is the change management expenses. And the ones
Exactly.
that cut the change management consulting services, it's the fluffy stuff, right? The minute you cut the fluffy stuff because you don't need it, the likelihood of failure in those implementations skyrocketed. And so I'm personally today, I'm really interested because Prop Fuel is about change. It's about looking at the way you engage your members. And if you're a client of ours, you understand this. It's looking at the way you engage your members through a totally different lens. It requires another item on your budget. It requires another item on your to-do list. It requires another item for your IT department. So, like, does that sound appealing? Those do not sound appealing. Therefore, we better be able to communicate the value of the change. And many times we can't. Many times the burden of the change, the anxiety of the change, outweighs the desire for improved engagement. And so that's what appeals to me is when we can convince you, Lynn, that at AANP, Prop Fuel, you guys should be using Prop Fuel. How now do you go back to your organization and encourage the rest of the team to embrace change? And that's why I'm personally and selfishly interested in this topic. Now, all of you might be interested because you have your pet projects, you have your things and your toys that you want people to embrace. How do we influence the people in our circle to embrace the things that we want to influence, the things that we want to make change with? And on the other side of the coin, how do you open your mind to embrace change when somebody else comes to you with it? So, Lynn, you want to
Yeah.
We always come with questions.
Yep.
We don't always need to go through these questions. Um, are you good starting with that first question in the queue here, which is when you hear the term change management, what comes to mind, and do you tend to associate it with a positive or negative experience? You good, or do you want to start somewhere else?
No, I can start with that one because at first, when I first started to, everybody is like, everybody is resistant to change if it's not their idea, if they don't own it. Truly and honestly, think about it. Somebody has now taken your car and put the steering wheel on the other side of the car. You're going to resist it. It's just that simple. So I feel that one of the first questions you should always ask when you're thinking about a change initiative is look at your stakeholders. Who are the people that it's going to directly affect? And really get down into it. It's like, what's in it for them? Because if you can identify what's in it for them and make
Yeah,
it,
the with them, right? What's in it for
yeah,
me?
the palpable, positive benefits that are going to help them, they're going to, the resistance is going to lessen.
Yeah,
So
what's in it for the IT person? What's in it
what's in it
for
for
the
the
executive
IT person?
director? What's in it for marketing? What's in it for membership? Yep.
And it's not linear either. It's going to go up and down. It's going to evolve as the change initiative is implemented. Um, and by that, think of, I mean, I'm going to ask somebody here. It's like somebody's probably gone through, okay, we are going to change our membership pricing structure. That is a change.
It sure is.
And there's going to be resistance to that. But, how did you go about selling it? Who were the people that you brought in as the champions of this change to actually have those conversations and sponsor the change so that people weren't resistant to it?
So I'd be curious to hear from any of you guys. I'll give you a minute. If nobody wants to speak, that's fine too. But I'm curious, Ben, Liz, Tyler, Dave, Amy, and anyone else with the cameras off. Um, is there something that you want to talk about as it comes to change management, or what comes to mind when you hear the word change management phrase?
I'll go first. We are in the process of doing an AMS change right now. So we
I'm
are,
sorry, Tyler. I can't
yeah,
read that. Who are you with?
Metal Service Center Institute out of
Thank you.
Rolling Meadow, Chicago,
Okay.
Illinois. So yeah, we're going through an AMS change right now,
From
um,
what to what?
from a 20 plus year old IMAS database to a Salesforce Fontiva is what we're changing to right now. So we're closing in on the final 60 days now before go live. And we have kind of various levels of buy-in internally. People that weren't really using IMAS that much to begin with, that are now, we're trying to motivate everyone to, contribute as we're still kind of demoing things a little bit in the sandbox test environment. And I guess that's where when I think of change management right now, it's working internally with the team to try and get people on board, comfortable before, we flip the switch and turn it on, and then all of a sudden, we all have to be able to manage our own sections of the association in that new database.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, please.
Great, Tyler. This is exactly the kind of stuff that really intrigues me with change management. So you're implementing a new system, right? Did you
hmm
map out what the intended outcomes and how you're going to measure perform, what does success, how do you define success when you're done with this implementation?
Lynn asked
hmm
me the same thing right before we started this. We were talking for a few minutes before. She said, like, "So, what's the outcome? What do you want to happen here today, Dave?" I was like, I don't know, just good talk, I guess." So it's funny.
Yeah.
Good question, Lynn. Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So right now, as you know, we are still trying to get everybody engaged with it. We're doing like a little friendly competition, right, where we've assigned kind of point values to um, doing certain things in the database, whether that's just uploading a profile picture, creating a new account in there. We've had a great kind of implementation team as well that we've been using for Fontiva through Fusion Span. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with them, but so they've been very helpful as far as, our specific areas that we're focusing on for, demos. And so we have a lot of great resources that we want people to use. And then obviously Fontiva has its own kind of community with a bunch of different certifications and classes and videos you can watch, take, so on and so forth. So we're trying to encourage people in that way. So I guess to answer your question, we're trying to apply, like a leaderboard, so to speak, of points of, what have you done in the database to kind of log and track some of that activity.
Thanks for that. I think that, because anybody who is managing a program, product, or service wants to know, how do we define success? Because aren't you reporting to somebody? Even if you're the CEO, you're reporting to your board, correct? Whether
Mhm.
it be on performance of the organization, performance of a program, a service, et cetera. So knowing how you're going to define that success is one of the key things to change management. And it also helps, when you're doing the research on the what's in it for me, then you translate it into what that intended outcome is. You've now connected the dots and you can start to bring those people along the journey with you. And it is a long journey.
Mhm.
That's it, Lynn. Whenever we kick off with a new client in our kickoff call, that's one of our questions is like, so how do you define success? How will we know if this has been fruitful working with us? Yeah, I love that question. It's hard to do too sometimes, like because oftentimes you're just like, well, we just want to make things better.
What
What exactly does that mean?
that
Like,
mean?
how do you
Yeah.
know if it's better? How do you know if you're what do you mean by engagement? How do we measure engagement? And as long as it doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be a starting point, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I've worked with many, many change management professionals, and
Hmm.
sometimes one of the things that I find exhausting is they continue to ask refining questions. They will
They
continue
get
to
too close to
refine
perfect.
that question
Yeah.
until the point where it's like, I can't go any deeper. I've got nothing else in the tank here. Let's just go with that.
Yeah. Done is
Uh,
better than perfect. But of
right.
course, I'm not in the military and I'm not doing brain surgery. So, who else? Anybody else want to comment on their experiences with, I'm broadening the question a little, their experiences change management in their organization?
I appreciate everything that Lynn has shared. I came in a little bit late, but from what I heard, it really resonated with me. I work for an association called Manufacturers Alliance. We work with executive teams from large global manufacturers. So um, might be everything from CFO to general counsel to the head of operations. And we are, professional society. We put out economic research and, industry analysis. If you've got an issue with your function and you're in the sector, we try to help you. We've gone through a lot of change over the years. I've been with my organization for 17 years now, and every year there's big changes. Right now, we are going through an 80/20 initiative where we are basically 80% of your profits come from 20% of your customers, 20% of your offerings, all of the work you put in. When you break it out, almost every organization, it's roughly 20% of your efforts probably relates to 80% of your profit. So what are you doing with that other 80%? And so we've brought that in-house, and um, the leadership team was really bought into it. But when you're talking to the rest of the organization, that's pretty scary. That's a lot of change. What does that mean for your jobs, your members, your offerings? Everything changes. So messaging was super important for us as we sunset offerings and programs. We are rearranging who manages what part of our programming. So just making sure that it wasn't just a top-down initiative. The leadership team needed to be there to be the catalyst for change and the driver, but we needed to make sure that it doesn't matter what your role in the organization is. you all, everyone completely understands what we're trying to do. They're part of developing where we should concentrate our efforts. Everyone's part of the messaging, how it impacts our customers. So it's been a lot of change, but just making sure that everyone's part of that process was definitely the most important thing. Otherwise, people get really scared. Messaging to the membership becomes confusing. As you onboard new staff, they're going to be talking to probably their colleagues more than their bosses about these changes. So just thinking about the messaging and communication was super important in that, you've got good stories to go along why all these things are happening. So, Lynn, to your point with stakeholders, whether it's internal staff, whether it's current members, potential members, making sure that you've got, really great stories and messaging so that everybody understands how impactful this is going to be for the organization down the road. And I think that's true with, a CRM change, a new offering, a pricing change. If it's more complex with the pricing model or simplified, you need to have really strong rationale and stories of why this is what's best for the organization, whether it's internal staff or the membership. So it's
Couldn't agree more. And I love the fact that you brought in the communication piece to this, because transparency is always the best remedy for resistance to change. If you tell people, why the change is happening and what's in it for them, not just change for change sakes, you're gonna have a better chance of success. And to Dave's point earlier, that statistic was back in 2015, the average failure rate was 75%.
Yeah, that strikes a bell. Yep.
Right. So, but the transparency, Dave, amazing. And I would pull on that thread a little bit because, when you do your stakeholder mapping and you do your communications, you're going to have a communication that is different for different stakeholder groups because the motivation for their change is going to be a little bit different. You have to have a good strategic, overview of how your communications are going to move the people or, the people to change, but the messaging might be a little bit different. Did you find that for your different stakeholder groups? Like your external versus internal?
They're so different. And especially, let's just say external stakeholders, some groups we are going to double down on, other ones we are sunsetting. So how do you, we need to make sure that those members who are typically coming from the same company, they might have an office one spot away. It might be a CFO and a treasurer, and we are getting rid of, this is not what's happening, but let's just say hypothetically, we're getting rid of our treasury counsel. We need to have really concrete messaging around why we are doing that for the organization, how we can or cannot support them in the future, and how it's impacting the rest of our business, because we don't want the two of them talking and having tough conversation about Manufacturers Alliance because we are removing value that they find in our services for one person. So each stakeholder has a different message, and it's the same thing internally, and documenting all of the communication plans and messaging so that anybody can find them and you don't need to pick up the phone and say, Lynn, what's the message there? What was the rationale? Everything's documented, from the actual message to templates of when and where to use certain messages and all of that fun stuff.
I couldn't agree more. It reminds me that, not, when we're talking about 75% failure rate, I can share an example of, I thought it was with AAMP. It was brought on to kind of pick up a failed project of getting all of their state organizations, their specialty organizations under an affiliate model, which is a huge change. That's bringing all those independent organizations under an umbrella where we had an agreement that we were all going to align under a strategic direction. And there was going to be a written agreement that we would not compete with one another, we would align. And I was sailing right along using my project management skills and my change management skills until I hit somebody who was so resistant to change that they derailed the project for a year. And I can honestly say it was my own hubris of not paying attention to monitoring the performance and the people along the way. I kept hearing in the background noise, but I wasn't keying into it. And that noise escalated it cascaded into basically derailing the project for the implementation for a year. So has anybody ever experienced something like that where you've been moving right along and all of a sudden you think everything's going great and boom, there's noise in the system and it has derailed, and how you get it back on track? It's also an element of change management.
Mm.
Come on, I can't be the only one here that's had a misstep in an implementation.
Yeah, so think about it for a second. I want to just say one thing. Mobilizer, that's a term we use internally. I'm bringing it into our world here at Prop Fuel for a minute. Our sales team is when they're working with somebody, Lynn, for example, at ANP, when we're talking to you or your team, the sales team ideally is trying to turn you into a mobilizer. And so our job is to give you the resources you need to show your IT person, the executive director, membership, marketing, whoever, what the change will bring. But the idea being, Dave, to your point, the importance of internally a mobilizer communicating clearly to the team why the change is valuable and what's in it for each role in the organization. And that's work, right? That's the change management work.
And it's consistent. I mean, it's not just a once and done either, Dave. I mean, I think it's got to be something that is continually fed and
Yeah.
nurtured
Yeah.
in that thought process at all levels, from the board all the way down to the person who's answering the telephone.
Well, because
If they answer the telephone.
everything's always under evaluation too,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to a subscription software service. The AMS is Tyler or Scott. Tyler, you're the one implementing a new AMS. Yeah, IMS to Salesforce or Fontiva. Yeah, like that's probably less likely going to be under evaluation next year or the year after. But, as the years go on, people are going to look at it, see what's going on with with Cannoli out there, the new AMS, and they're going to start questioning it. And everything's always up for evaluation. So you're right, Lynn. That makes sense to constantly be thinking about what are we getting out of it and what do we need out of it.
Well, and Tyler's gonna, you're gonna have your baseline. We have Fontiva and so Salesforce, and you're going to have a baseline, and a year from now, you're going to say, man, why did we do this? Or you're going to have colleagues that are really frustrated with certain reporting or how you're
This
using
sucks.
your
Yeah.
events. You're going to have to make changes. So how do you prioritize that from a time perspective, a money perspective, consultant time? And it'll be ongoing. You'll continue to renew the contract, but it's surely not over.
You bring up a great point, Dave, which is after it's done, implemented, everybody's using it, there's always a group of people or the person that's going to be complain about things that aren't like they used to be. The reports aren't as easy. This report has got a problem. A member couldn't log in. Whatever. There's always going to be the complaining. Any suggestions on how to deal with the naysayer, with the Debbie Downer when it comes to change? Anyone at all?
Me.
And Lynn, I'm sure you have a response to this. If nobody
This
responds,
is
yeah,
John.
Jonathan, go.
Hey, how are you? This is Jonathan. From my experience, is when you have a naysayer or a agitator or whatever word you want to use to describe the conflict, if you will. They want to be heard. And
Yeah.
99% of the time, you just got to listen and bite your tongue most of the time too, right? Listen and then make sure that they walk away feeling heard and that you understood them in their viewpoint. Because that's if they're taking the time and energy to share with you an experience that they want you to hopefully make an improvement on, and you say, I hear you, I've written this down, we'll talk with the team, we'll let me get back to you, and make sure you get back to them, and let me see what we can do for you. We do have and acknowledge your restrictions, right? We are not all of our platform might have, restrictions. Might not be able to do this or this, but we might be able to come up with an innovative solution and think out of the box to deliver on what you're trying to get out of XYZ, right? So that's just my 2 cents.
That's a good one. I love that. People want to be heard.
And there's also an element to change for people people who resist change is, the fear, or maybe they just don't understand how to utilize the system. Remember, there's a whole lot of people that need to be trained, educated, into the new system or the change so that they can effectively use it. That has to go part and parcel to any change initiative to make sure that the talent that you're bringing along the change can actually use it effectively.
And then people learn differently, right? Like we
Differently,
just
right?
Brittany and I just interviewed somebody, and we asked them both how if they wanted to utilize a new platform, new technology, how would they do that? One said, I would poke at things and see what they do. The other said, I would watch somebody do it. Totally different, right? One wants to see how to do it. The other wants to play and poke. And so like I think naturally you're going to have some people that are very adaptive, very open to change. Let's look at AI, for example. How many of you, I'm very curious, if your camera's on, just show of hands, how many of you use AI on a daily basis right now? Okay, thank you, Ben, for being honest, and Scott. And it's been out for what, 2 years now? Like ChatGPT became the thing 2 years ago, I think. 2.5 year and a half. I can't remember when it was. 2023. So a year and a half. Did I do my math right on that? It was
That's me.
November of 2023 that ChatGPT came out, right? Nobody knows. Anyway, so I have finally gotten to the point where I'm constantly using it, and it only took me a year and a half. Like we can't afford to take a year and a half for people to start using Funtiva, Tyler. Like you need them switching now.
Right.
We're not using this now. You are using this now. You don't have a year and a half to figure out how to incorporate it into your processes. I don't know what my point was. I lost that a long ago.
But it's a good point. I'm going to pull that thread just a little bit
Thank you.
because you got to do it right
Save
now.
me.
It's got to be this, blah, blah, blah. The Speed of Change, another good book. Sometimes overwhelms your teams, your organization.
Yeah.
Sometimes you kind of have to get a big win and then take a break and let people actually settle into it before you bring on the next big change. Change for change's sake is really disruptive in an organization. And when, there is an exhaustion point for change. I mean, some of us like to live in disruptive environments and some people don't.
Yeah. You just said take a win.
Take a win.
I want to emphasize that for a second. I think oftentimes, and this is a cultural thing, we forget to celebrate the wins. And we spend more time focusing on the problems. I know here at Propville, we try to celebrate the wins. It's difficult sometimes when you feel like everything's falling apart, things are going wrong.
I have to
And
tell you, in some of the budget discussions that I've had, when I was building in, the change management, there were celebrations built into the budget, things that were recognizing people and rewarding them for actually moving along the continuum. That, why is this? Why are we doing that? That's not, and I would constantly have to come back to the change initiative, the scope, and what the intended outcome was, and walk the leadership through. This is how we move people along the change initiative. It's, you lead them and you reward them. If you just are constantly making them work with no recognition or no reward, you're going to have resistance to this change. If you really want the intended outcome, you have to build those rewards in through the system. This is basic human nature, really.
I want to go to the chat, but before I do, is there anything any of you want to say? Anything you want to get out? Something you've been thinking, but I keep talking over you. Okay. I want to go to Amanda's comment. She's under the weather. So Amanda, I'm not going to make you come out, but Amanda says, at WWWP, I was tasked with creating a new emergency financial assistance program. Emergency financial assistance program, I think. The success would be lessening stress to employees, providing assistance to veterans, getting veterans financial counseling, and finding out how much was actually spent on this. Did that, got buy-in, and got everyone on board, only to find out that the executives did not really want to know how much was being spent and suffering from sticker shock. What went wrong here, Lynn?
Well, I would have,
I think it goes back to your first comment, but
yeah,
we didn't
probably.
set expectations.
Right. And that's the discussion you have with your leadership team right off the bat. Time, resources, and money. And when I say resources, I'm talking about the human resources, technology resources, but the money. And always a transparency. If you can't tell them that it's going to be exactly this much dollar investment and show an ROI, then build it in when you have those stakeholder conversations. That I know that our members are looking for this and have said that they are willing to, purchase this, engage in this, participate in this. So you can actually do some extrapolation and maybe put some ROI in there. That's how I would approach it. And that's how I do approach it anymore. But I have to tell you, once the executives dig their heels in and they're no longer a supportive sponsor, it is an uphill battle to get that change initiative back on track, because sponsorship at the top is critical for success. Just like, when you're maybe doing anything and there's a naysayer, just like I had with my affiliate program. I had one it wasn't really loud. It was just quietly in the background, not supporting the project, but it derailed the confidence. It created all kinds of questions that trickled back up to the board of directors, which then I had to stop and actually go back in and answer so that I could reassure them. But it was an eye-opener. If you lose the support of your sponsors, you will have difficulty getting it back on track. Doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means that you're going to have to retool, reshape, build your ROI, get other people to help build that support from the bottom up, maybe.
So leadership buy-in, obviously super important. I'm going to get a little fluffy here.
No.
By show of hands, how many of your organizations have core values that are emphasized? Okay, leave them up. Hold them up for a second. Keep your hand up if the core values are referenced on a regular basis when making decisions. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad to see Brittany's hand up. Robson, there we go. So that's good because I think in things like this, like I think one of our core values, ours, it's cute. Ours spells out fuel for popular. F is forward motion. And that oftentimes is aligned with change. Forward motion requires change in many cases and experimentation. And then we'll regularly evaluate each other on our alignment with core values. So if there's somebody that is not embracing this concept of forward change, it sparks a forward motion.
Value.
It sparks a conversation as why not? Where are we struggling with? So yeah, and it all comes back to, I think Dave brought this up earlier. It all comes back to that conversation of transparency and dialogue and knowing what to talk about, Lynn, like expectations.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I'm taking on a new project, a new change initiative with AAMP. They've just gone through the first phase of re-envisioning their strategic plan. And I'm going to be leading that initiative as the staff person for the board and the stakeholders.
Mm.
So I'm going to get to put all of this that I am sharing with you into practice over the next 18 months or so.
So this is work. We are
This is
working right
work.
now. This isn't just lunch.
Mhm.
Ben says, and Ben, I'm going to read this out loud. If you want to add to it, I welcome you to. But Ben says, I'm working on revamping our volunteerism systems to internally expand capacity and externally provide more meaningful opportunities for our members and improve their overall volunteer experience. I've been successful in establishing interest and understanding of the potential of the revamp, but there's been some struggle with changing mindsets on how volunteers can be utilized. So there's been so the problem Ben's faced with, there's been some struggle with changing mindsets. Ben, do you want to expand on that or?
Sure. Yeah. So I was once, positive with the phrase, we live in a world of infinite possibilities and finite resources, and I refuse to accept that. So rather than changing the finite resources, we figure out how to do more with what we have, which is
Yeah.
also addressed in volunteerism. One of the challenges that I've run into, I've been able to successfully articulate that and get buy-in from other departments. Yes, being able to do more with less and be able to expand what we have. We're all so busy as it is. But the challenge is thinking of like the creative thinking around how to utilize volunteers, understanding where we can expand that capacity with these additional resources, with these additional opportunities, and the kind of creative creative thinking around that, and what is felt to be appropriate for a volunteer to do versus what is required for a staff member to do. So that's kind of the areas that I've been looking to encourage their creative thinking and encourage them to embrace a change in their understanding of what we can invite our volunteers to do to give them these meaningful opportunities.
I can see both sides of that continuum, the what's in it for the volunteer and what's in it for the organization, and really tying that together to create this compelling picture and story about how they're going to drive the organization forward.
Amen.
And Ben, have you thought about all of the stakeholders? I'm going back to Lynn's initial conversation, all of the stakeholders and what's in it for them.
Yeah, it's the varying degrees and levels of volunteerism from the boards and committee structures that are set in place that are much more formally established, and then down to the one-day event volunteers, but how our meetings department, our education department, our advocacy department, our membership department can benefit from these opportunities, and what they can provide for the organization, and then alternately how these opportunities provide more engagement for members and develop a pipeline of volunteer leadership that allows us to solidify a succession plan for a governance team, all these different opportunities.
So many threads.
Right.
Now,
Thank you.
Rachel says, Rachel, I think you're with California Restaurant. Is that right? California Restaurant Association?
That is correct. And I'm so sorry for my camera being off. I had some labs to do and I was kind of trying to kill two birds with one stone. So, but
That's
I am
okay.
with the California Restaurant Association.
And do you want, I mean, to summarize, I'll read this, but maybe you can expand on this. I'm hoping to revamp our onboarding process and the data we keep track of and how to manage that or input that in our system. Would love to see a future discussion on the onboarding process and what others are doing. I think we did one, but I always love going back to the onboarding process. But let's talk about that from a change management perspective for a second, because it takes effort. You know, this is not effortless. You've got different systems that you might work with, from your broadcast messaging, prop fuel type thing. You have SMS, you have phone calls, you have all these other, you have one-on-one conversations with leadership, you have mentoring, you have the community. Like, there's all kinds of stuff to bring into this. Is not effortless to build an onboarding program like this. So how do you convince the world that something needs to change there, Rachel? What is your, is that something that everybody agrees and there's no change management necessary? Everybody's all in on it? Or do you feel as though there's a little resistance?
I think there's resistance on both sides. And so I think a lot of our conversations sometimes are centered around the member. And I think also there's a lot of times where we struggle with, like others have mentioned on this call, the board. Even just internally, we're going through. I forget the name of the gentleman that discussed it, but we're also going through a change right now. We're trying to switch from, oh my gosh, from like WebLink. It's been called Member Clicks, Personify. It has all these different names. We're finally trying to switch from them and get a new AMS system. So we're going to AMS Fest next month in Chicago. And so, to answer your question, we do not have overall buy-in. I think with our staff, it's kind of, let's put out the biggest fire. And I think that that's kind of the same way that a lot of our restaurant members look at things, just putting out the biggest fire. And I'm thinking, while we're revamping so much behind the scenes, it's going to be a long process of moving over data, making sure that we move the data over that actually matters, and that we find something that can track the data that, will give us answers. I sit in on so many of these talks and different Zooms that you do specifically, and you're always mentioning different types of data that are really helpful in kind of getting to know our members better, and we just don't do that. And part of it's because people don't fill that out. Part of it's because we don't have the bandwidth to get that information. And so if I were to change our onboarding process, we switch systems, I think there's so much more information we could track and then better know our members. But it's just like you said, it is not effortless. It is going to be a long-term project. And it's, we do not have buy-in all over. And that's tough.
Yeah. So just, from a new member onboarding perspective, the what's in it for me thing with the IT people love the data. You can capture all kinds of data in new member onboarding process. Membership loves the renewals, year one renewals. Like, year one renewals is typically the lowest renewal number. If we can get that number up, and the way you get that up is by showing value in year one, even more so in the first 6 weeks. But now you have, and then the executive leadership likes the revenue and the numbers, membership numbers. Yeah. So those are the things I think we think about when it comes to showing the importance of revamping the new member onboarding program.
And I would add to that, creating a clear statement of what the intended outcome is. When you're talking about onboarding, onboarding, you're going to get data, but what's the outcome? Just that you have more data? I think you could actually, really create a compelling statement about more data will lead to this, and this will, is what's in it for me, what's in it for the organization, what's in it for the participant, etc. I can't state enough how having, and it's, you're going to go through a couple of iterations of it, because you're going to refine it with stakeholder feedback and input, but really refining that vision of what your intended results are going to do is what motivates people to keep sponsoring, keep participating, keep working towards those changes.
Absolutely. I think one thing that I wanted to add to, and I'm just curious if your guys' feedback is with the general topic of, change management. Sometimes there are big changes that need to be made. And when you're getting pushback from members, from the board, from just all these different avenues, it's tough. And so where is there a happy medium sometimes? And again, this is super general, but like how much change is too much, while we're on this topic, what tends to be kind of scary for people that really don't want to move forward, even though it is for the greater good. And I think it's just too much change at once. I mean, do you kind of understand what I'm asking?
Absolutely. And it's dependent upon your organization. It's dependent upon your stakeholders. You're going to get some in spaces are really used to fast-paced change. Others, maybe not, which would be, regulatory agencies or, people that work in that space. So find the happy medium. Again, identify what the intended outcome is, and then kind of work a little bit backwards, and you'll find the pace for your organization, because you want the successes. You want to take the wins as they come, because that's only going to build more momentum for your change. That's only going to build more support for the activities that you're working towards.
Rachel, you may have seen this. Robson, thank you, Robson, posted a roundtable discuss. So there's a March roundtable. So roundtables are prop fuel clients that get together. Robson, is that what this is? Is this a prop fuel roundtable discussion?
No, that was the March membership mastermind.
Okay, so this is a membership mastermind session. Okay, so there's a membership mastermind session on new member onboarding, first year member engagement. There's the link in YouTube. I'm always up for doing it again, but you can have that now. You can hang up from this and listen to that for the next hour. That's what I
That
would do.
works for me. Love that. Thank you.
And Lynn, we have just a couple more minutes. Reader's Digest version. I'm dating myself with that reference, huh? Who knows what Reader's Digest is? Oh my gosh. But short version. Can you talk a little bit about change management of your member, doctors, and board members' actual philosophies to accept others' philosophies as part of the change management? How do you get doctors to accept other doctors' philosophies? Did I ask that right?
And if I had the answer to that, I would be a gazillionaire. The only thing I can share is to utilize the best practices that are out there and to continue to refine them for your project, your change initiative. These are all, just like any standard, they have best practices, but it really does depend on the individual people to get them from point A to point B. It's changing a mind, it's changing a thought process, it's changing someone's willingness to listen or to ask questions. So, come at it from a strategic point that you're taking them from point A to point B for the benefit of the organization. It's going to drive a positive change, not a negative change. There is positive outcome to that, and work through it individually. There are lots of resources out there for change management. Like I say, there are a gazillion consultants out there. There are a lot of people who dabble in it like me, who can just talk to what the principles are, and have applied them. But you'll find your change pace. You'll find what works for you, and you'll find what works for those that you're working with, and continue to refine it and continue to reward and be transparent in the way in which you're doing this, and you'll realize success.
I love these topics. Lynn, thank you so much for being our subject matter expert. I'm going to get you on our podcast as well.
Well, can I say thank you to everybody for listening?
You
Because
can.
this was kind of like, I love talking about stuff, but this was kind of fun. Thanks.
So we got, thank you, Dave, for the comments. Member onboarding outside of automated solutions. No, come on. I'm just kidding. Yes.
Sorry.
Early engagement best practices, ideas within the first 90 days. That's a good one. All right, Robson, Brittany, you got that one down. Any other topics?
Can I drop one in verbally?
Please. Yeah.
Let's talk about what professional development we need for membership engagement. I mean, I'd like to know what is it out there that people need to, what do we need to continue to learn? I've been
Yeah,
in membership
broadly.
engagement for 40 years, and I'm constantly, what's new? What's the new thinking and how we engage members? It's not just about getting them to join or renew. There are other ways in which we have to, bring people into the membership equation. And
Yeah,
I'm
professional
curious.
development, CE, we
curious.
could talk about it. It's a big revenue opportunity for many organizations too.
Can I add a
Okay.
nuance to that?
Please. Yeah.
We're all here and we're all in membership roles, but at least in my organization, I have a lot of staff who are also member facing who are not engaged in any of these activities. So there's developing yourself or your membership people, but then there's everyone else that touches a member that is maybe not thinking this way. So hearing how teams are working with the broader organization would be very interesting.
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to wrap. It's 1 Eastern. Thank you all so much. Really, really appreciate the participation. And I still love having lurkers too. So it's okay if you don't participate, but I love it when you do. So thank you all. We'll see you in a month. We'll come up with a good topic around that somewhere.
Bye.